Duran Torres, School of Chrome Guide Service, SLC Flies. I got something super awesome for you today. I know it's been a couple days for patterns, but I just haven't got to it. I've had some other stuff going on, but this one's going to be super cool for you. Kind of a twist on a traditional spay fly that's decked out and it's tied on a tube. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie a Skykomish Sunrise. This is one of the cool looking kind of traditional spay flies, wet flies, tied for steelhead. It's got white, yellow, and red color tones in there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to deck it out, we're going to tie it on a tube, and it's going to look something like this. This one's not dry yet, and it'll look a little bit different too. Once it's dry, it'll be a little bit more full. But you can see it's and also tied with some red barred saddle hackle. It's a super cool fly. All right, here we go. Make sure my needle's in here. Got a pro tube. I've already made these connections. I do these kind of in bulk. We got a small and a medium. Put them together and tie the junction. And I put I melt the back of this tube just to make a little bubble back there, just so that keeps my thread and stuff from slipping, and it kind of just acts as a bumper. Okay, and this isn't. If I can find my ruler here. It isn't a very long fly. Really, it's going to be, the tying surface is about an inch and a quarter at most. The fly will look a lot bigger when it's done, but the total tying surface is not very big. So, going to use these techniques, composite loop techniques that I talked about in another video, and we're going to tie this fly, and it's going to make an old traditional cool fly, kind of have a new flair to it. I'm going to start off with some yellow ice dub. This is just kind of the bumper, that colored portion on the butt, the little dubbing ball on the butt section of this. Pull these pieces apart from each other, lay them back on top, pull them apart. Once you got your bunch, open up your loop, your dubbing loop. Put your dubbing in there. I kind of spread it out a little bit so I got about 2 inches worth of total length. Give it a few spins, spin it up. And this one I'm not going to comb it out or brush it out. I like the way it looks. Make sure my needle stays in there. And I'll just wrap this baby up. It'll give me about 3 wraps on the butt section. Bring it back to the front. Tie this thing off. When I tie on tubes like this, and if they're going to have a sleek body, from the butt section, it's kind of a sleek body. I try to minimize the amount of wraps I use to secure things off. I'm not going to make a big ball up there. It just kind of looks funky if it's tapered that way. Then I got some ultra wire red. I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to tie a long tag in here, but I'm going to leave it, I'm going to give it a couple wraps right now, but when I wrap up, I'm going to have this tag and kind of fill in the underneath, the belly part of the fly. Then I'm going to use some red crystal braid. Looks like it comes like this. This is copper, but this one's going to be red color. Tie this in on the side. When you tie these, anything you're going to wrap up the body of your tube or your hook, tie it in on the side, and it makes the transition a little easier, makes it look better as you wrap it forward. Okay, I'm going to wrap it forward, and I'm going to wrap it all the way. I'm going to stop my thread right here where I started my junction. I'm going to wrap this flat braid all the way up, making my body nice and even. One more to the front, and tie it off. One thing, if you're tying tubes that you can run into, you gotta be wary of, is that your tube spinning on your needle. So make sure you're careful. You can't quite put as much pressure. And we're just gonna wrap this this red ultra wire rib all the way up. You can't put quite as much pressure on a tube as you can with a shank, just because the tube has a tendency to spin if you're not locked all the way down. I'm going to helicopter this wire, so I just grab it and spin it, and then it will break right where I want it to. You won't have a big pokey tag end. I'm going to make another loop here and bring it back to right where my flat braid started. Okay. Bring my thread back up to the front. So I have, 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch right here worth of tying surface that my shoulder is going to go, my ostrich for my swimming material is going to go, and then I have some red barred saddle that's going to go there as well. So as I'm doing this, I'll talk you through it, but I'm just, again, got my piece of paper that's measured out, and I'm going to lay all those materials down and then spin them up. So I'm going to take, again, as the base of this, a little bit of this yellow eye stub to kind of stay with the same theme here. This yellow stands out. It's a very, very strong color, so I'm not going to, you don't need a lot of it at all. And I'm going to make a patch that's about an inch to 1.25 inches of dubbing like this. Then I'm going to go with some, here's some already cut, some Predator wrap. This is barred orange Predator wrap. Okay, and you don't need a lot of this. I don't want this huge shoulder, but I'm going to measure it from about the end of where my fly is going to be. I'm not going to end up using this stuff. This will be cut off. About the end of my fly is going to be to my butt section there. Trim that. I'm going to lay that down on about the first half, the top half of that dubbing. I'm going to go with more Predator wrap, but this one is, that one was an orange barred clear, and this was an orange and black barred. Let's see, orange and black barred. Same measurement, about 1 inch. Lay that down over the top of the orange barred clear. And then we are going to go with some white fox. Arctic fox, marble fox, whatever kind of fox you got. Okay, this stuff, in this, honestly, it all depends on what your fox is, or your coon. Raccoon's another one. Steely coon's a good one. I'm kind of pulling some of these longer guard hairs out. It just depends on the consistency and the texture of your coon or your fox or whatever. This bunch came and it's pretty wiry, so I don't need a lot of it. Okay, I'm gonna measure that to there. It's not soft. I guess what I'm saying is it's wiry, so I'm gonna lay that down at the very end of this. Okay, tiny bit of this yellow dubbing right back over the top of it. So my shoulder's made. I have my shoulder portion made. I'm going to lay that out of the way. And then we are going with we're going to go with some ostrich again, but we're going to stay with this yellow. Again, this dubbing, this yellow ice dub is kind of the undertone color here. Again, it's a super strong color, so you don't need a lot. With the ostrich, I'm only going to make about 1 inch of ostrich. Inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch, not a ton of this stuff. I'll be able to pack a bunch of it in a small space. Okay, I'm going to take, it'd be cool if it was barred. You don't need barred, but here's red ostrich. I'm going to take a good chunk of this stuff out. Come up here. I'm probably going to pinch I'm probably going to take a good 12 to 15 barbs off of this. Pull some of the ones out that are either really, really long or really short. Okay, I'm going to have a chunk of ostrich. I'm going to measure this again. I want this stuff, when it's finished, to be, the tips to be just off the back. Remember, with this tube, your hook's going to be back here like this, so I want this ostrich just to be off the back, and I'm going to give it about another 1/4 of an inch for the curve and the bend as it splays out. Trim that off. I'm going to put that in a nice big chunk on my dubbing. Put my other piece of yellow dubbing over the top, and then I'm going to stick this stuff in my dubbing loop. Open up your loop. Put the first piece in there, put your shoulder in. Keep that loop open. Put your swimming material in. Okay, pinch your thread and get your finger underneath so that you can slide your material up right to where your loop's going to start, and you just kind of pick through and make sure all your material is spread out enough so that when you spin this loop, it won't bind up on any of your materials. They'll be able to spin nice and tight. I'm going to trim a little of this off. I don't want quite that much. I'm going to trim these end of these barbs on this ostrich nice and short too. I don't want the little stubble sticking way out. Okay, there's my composite loop. Pinch your string, give it a good spin. Another good spin on there. Take your needle. I'm going a little faster on this one just because we've talked about some of this before, but then you're going to take your pick. I like a nice good, this is actually a threading needle for worms. Another one that I use a lot of is just a regular sewing needle on the larger side. I don't know what size it is, but just a sewing needle that's probably about 2 inches, 3 inches long. Seems to have a little bit of a sharper point, finer point to it. Kind of helps me get down into that when I'm doing smaller things. When I'm doing smaller flies, it helps really get in there and pick some of that dubbing out, pick some of that fur out, so there's a nice tight wrap around the material. Okay, boom, there we go. Toothbrush. Brush this baby out. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but as I'm brushing this out, if you're here, you can see that there's just extra pieces flying out of this thing. And all those are pieces that are unnecessary in your fly. There's no need to have pieces that are not going to hold on when you're swimming it or when a steelhead's going to bite it. Okay, since the ostrich is super, super tight and there's not a lot of dubbing in there, I use very little dubbing. I don't need to pick that stuff out. Just need to pick the shoulder out, brush it out, get your water. Okay, find your spot that you want to part this and start parting your material. Pinch, pull down, pinch, pull down. And you just keep re-wetting your fingers and pinching and pulling down. And this is, again, I've said this before, but this is where material handling and practice really come into play. The first few times you do this, if you're trying to learn composite loops, the first few times you do this, it's going to be a nightmare. Especially getting your measurements right and just trying to get everything to work for you. Okay, there we go. Baby's laid back like some hair. Then we start wrapping. Shoulders coming first, one wrap in front of the other. So my predator wrap is down. Next wrap, got a little less tension on my needle. Next wrap was the wrap of fox or coon or whatever you end up using. I'm using fox. The next wrap and a half to 2 wraps will be the ostrich. And keep pulling this stuff back as you're wrapping. Okay, and there we go. Gonna make sure I keep adjusting my needle because my needle's wanting to pull down a little bit because I'm putting a lot of tension on this thing. Putting a lot of tension on it, which is necessary. Boom. Okay. Pull this stuff back again. I like to give it about another 1 to 2, maybe 3 wraps, just depending on how it's feeling. Wrap that baby to make sure it's good and secure. Take your needle again, kind of rotate your vise as you're picking these things out. You should be good. If you give it a good brush before you wrap, you usually don't have to pick out too much as it lays over. Usually it lays pretty nice. Back comb it. Back towards the front, I guess. You're using your toothbrush to brush back towards the front of the fly. Back again. Okay. Back towards the front of the fly at a few different angles. Just make sure everything is free and clear to swim and move and do what it's going to do. That's already looking super cool. When it dries out, it's going to look totally different. Or not totally different, but it's just, you can already see this one's drying and just how much more it stands up and how much more that shoulder comes out. Okay, awesome looking fly. Last piece, saddle hackle for the tips. If you don't already know about these guys or haven't bought material from them yet, do. OPST, the material that they have is awesome. Like, I just got some saddles in, and the quality of this stuff is top notch. I mean, it's just, the stuff looks so good. So I'm gonna pick four. I'm gonna pick 4 saddles off of this, and I'm gonna try to make sure that they are all relatively the same length. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the reason I want them to be relatively the same length is that so they're relatively the same stiffness. If you get a short one and then you get a really long one and you trim them till they're the same length, they're going to have a different stiffness to them. So going to take these, I'm going to take all of them actually, and I'm going to line them up. I'm going to be kind of doing this a little bit off camera, but I'm going to take all 4 of these, get them lined up. I'll do 2 at a time, it'll make it a little quicker. Just get the tips matched up, and then I'm gonna kind of give them a rough measurement here, and then I'm gonna strip them so that I got some fine points to tie on. So I want this saddle to be just longer than my ostrich. Not a lot, but just longer. You have all of these different lengths of things in here that make it really fishy looking, and it swims really nice. So got that measure. You can see that sweet arch right there. Take that, I'm going to pinch and pull those hackles down, those fibers down, and then cut it off so I have some little bare barbs down there. Set those aside. I'm going to do the same thing with these other 2. And again, if you haven't either heard of OPST, Olympic Peninsula Skagit Tactics, or if you haven't got any of their material yet, I know it's if you're a fly tyer, it is difficult. At least for me, it's difficult to buy quality materials that you need online, just because it's really hard. You're not there. You're not there in person, and you're not able to look at what you're going to get. These guys have top-notch stuff. Everything's top-notch in there, so don't be afraid to buy it online. Okay, I'm going to put these in individually. I'm going to crisscross the top of them so they're all going to go equally in kind of 4 different directions here, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. As this ostrich starts to dry, you just got to kind of, practice your material handling here and push stuff out of the way. And get it tied on how you want to tie it. Or you get it tied on how you want it to look. So I got one piece there. I'm going to rotate my vise a bit. And I'm going to crisscross the top of that. Got another one there. Give it one more like that. I'm going to go upside down. And I'm going to tie these other 2 on. If you haven't tied tube flies yet, or checked out tube flies, fish tube flies, they're a cool way to mix up your fishing, especially if you're fishing you're fishing water where either it's a little shallow, or it doesn't have to be shallow, but you don't want or you don't need big weighted flies. You don't need a big heavy lead eyes. Or if you're a guy that doesn't like to fish weighted flies and you like to just use either non-weighted or very lightly weighted flies and use your sink tip to control your depth, that's another plus. And then on these tube flies, once you hook them and you got this tube release, you don't have a shank, you don't have a bunch of other stuff to worry about. Your direct drive right to your hook. These guys kind of flared out a little bit, so I'm just gonna grab them. I'm gonna grab everything, just give it a couple tight wraps. Okay, now this looks kind of ugly for a second. The head is looking kind of weird, but the plus about tube flies, I'm done here, so I'm gonna give it a whip finish. And I'm not going to give it a lot of whip finish. I'm only going to give a few because I'm going to put some head cement in there, and I don't want it to be any bulkier than it is. The thing about the tube flies is that most of the time you're putting some kind of cone or sonic disc or whatever. There's a head that's going to cover up a lot of this mess on here. Some of my tube flies, I don't have it, but some I do when it matches right. Okay, I'm going to color that. The cone's going to pretty much cover this whole thing, but for the parts that it doesn't, I like to make sure the color matches. I'm going to give a little bit of head cement in here, so then when it does dry, we're really secure on the knot. Okay, again, that looks kind of funky, but what we're going to do here is we're going to take a red cone and slide it on to our small tubing and push it up to the front the best that you can get it. There might be a little gap in there, but that's alright. That's not gonna worry about anything like that. Okay, push this thing off. You're gonna trim this tubing so there's just, 1/8 to a 1/16 inch of tubing there. Let's see if I can do this for you, so you can still see. You take it out, and with that little bit, you take your lighter and just barely melt that tubing. You just want that thing to bead up a little bit. and roll back just so it holds that tube on. Okay, put that baby back on there. Give it a couple more brushes just to make sure everything's standing at attention. Brush it back, and that is a Steelhead Spay take on a Skykomish Sunrise.